All right, today we're diving into it's basically the new global rule book for clinical trials. It's called ICH E6R3, Good Clinical Practice. And, its mission is pretty profound, to protect the people who actually participate in these trials, and, just as importantly, to make sure the results we get are absolutely rock solid. And that really brings us to the big question, right? Think about it. Clinical trials today are more advanced than they've ever been. I mean, we're using AI, data from wearables, super complex trial designs. We're pushing medicine into the future. But have the rules actually kept up with all that progress? Well, for a long time, the answer was not really. And that's exactly what E6R3 is designed to fix.
So, you might be asking, why the big upgrade now? Well, the old rules were great. They were foundational. But honestly, they were built for a totally different era, a simpler, paper-based world. They just weren't designed to handle the incredible speed, the massive scale, and frankly, the complexity of the research we're doing today.
What you're seeing here is a really fundamental shift in thinking. We're moving away from these rigid, one-size-fits-all processes. Instead, we're heading towards a much smarter, more focused future. One that really embraces flexibility, efficiency, and all this modern tech. But, and this is key, it's all scaled to the actual risks of a specific trial. Okay, but before we jump into all the cool new modernizations, it's super important to talk about what hasn't changed. Because while the methods are definitely getting an upgrade, the ethical foundation of good clinical practice, that remains the absolute unshakable core of everything. And this quote, this really says it all. This is the single most important point. You can think of it as the North Star for every single clinical trial. At the end of the day, no scientific question, no matter how important, can ever outweigh the rights, safety, and well-being of a participant. Full stop. Every other rule, every single regulation flows from this one core idea. And these are the non-negotiables, the absolute pillars that hold it all up. They make sure that every trial is scientifically sound, that anyone who participates does so voluntarily through informed consent, and that an independent ethics committee has looked at everything and given it the green light. All right, now let's get to the heart of the E6R3 update. We're talking about 3 major shifts in thinking that are designed to make clinical trials smarter, safer, and way more efficient. These are really the key concepts you want to get your head around. First up, we have something called quality by design, or QBD for short. Think of it this way. It's all about being proactive instead of reactive. So instead of waiting for problems to pop up and then fixing them, QBD means you start at the very beginning by asking, what is absolutely critical to protect our participants and get reliable results? And then the entire trial is built from the ground up, specifically to protect those critical factors. Next up is the risk-based approach. And really, this is all about working smarter, not just harder. It means you focus your time, your money, and your attention on the things that pose the biggest risks to participant safety and the reliability of your data. It's a huge move away from that old model of just checking every single box with the exact same level of intensity, no matter how important it is. And that leads us perfectly into our third big modernization, proportionate processes. This is basically the practical result of that risk-based approach we just talked about. It just means that all the trial activities, the procedures, the monitoring, the data collection, you name it, should be scaled to fit the risks you've actually identified. The whole goal here is to avoid piling unnecessary work and burden on both the participants and the research sites themselves. So how does this all work in practice? Well, it's a continuous cycle. First, you identify the potential risks to those critical factors. Then you evaluate how big of an impact they could have. Next, you figure out how to control them with specific strategies. Of course, that plan has to be communicated to everybody involved. And it's not a one-and-done thing. It's constantly reviewed to see if it's working. And finally, everything you do is reported. It's truly a living, breathing process. Okay, now we're getting to what is arguably the single biggest part of this whole update. How E603 is set up to handle the data revolution that's completely transformed clinical trials. Yup, the biggest change? It's all about the data. I mean, the old guidance was written long before things like electronic health records or data streaming in from wearables were even a common thing. E6R3 finally provides a clear modern framework for the digital world we actually live in. So for the first time, the guidance actually maps out the entire life cycle of data, from start to finish. It covers everything from the moment it's initially captured and reviewed, through its transfer and finalization, all the way to how it's stored long-term, its retention, and even its eventual destruction. This is really the first time we've had a clear end-to-end framework for governing data. And of course, if you're managing all this digital data, you need rules for the computer systems that handle it. E6R3 is very clear on this. Any system you use has to be validated, meaning proven to be fit for its purpose. It needs to have rock-solid security and clear user management to control who can access what. And maybe most critically, it has to maintain a complete and secure audit trail that records every single action ever taken on that data. So after all that, what's the real-world impact? What does this all mean on the ground? Well, this updated guidance matters because it takes all these principles and translates them into something real: smarter, safer, and more efficient clinical trials. And the benefits really are crystal clear. When you focus on risk, you get safer trials for participants. When you emphasize critical data quality, you get more reliable results. And by cutting out a lot of the unnecessary complexity, you increase efficiency, which ultimately can help speed up the development of new medicines. So you see, this is so much more than just a regulatory update. It's really a framework for innovation. Having a flexible, intelligent rulebook like this creates a much better path to developing better medicine. And that just leaves us with one final, exciting question. With smarter trials now possible, what breakthroughs are we going to unlock next?